Q plus MA equals C. The quality of your service plus the quantity of your service plus the mental attitude in which it is rendered always equals compensation.
Yo, what's up, y'all? Welcome back to Black Excellence Daily. I'm your host, Sean Croxton. Thank you so much for tuning in. We've got Dr. Dennis Kimbro on the show to wrap up our week. Today, Dr. Kimbro is going to share a very inspiring story of a woman of very little means who used compound interest to change the lives of so many people. And I wanted to play this because whenever I bring up investing, there's always those, 1, 2, 3 people who are like, I don't have extra money to invest, which may be true. I don't have a lot of money to invest. Well, you don't need a lot of money. Because with investing, as you're going to hear, just a little bit of money invested over a long period of time compounds often into a lot of money. So we have to learn how compound interest works. One thing I recommended that you do this maybe 3 months ago, download a compound interest calculator on your phone and just start playing with the numbers, right? Think about, okay, my Netflix is $19, my Hulu is $10, and I probably order $100 of Uber Eats every month. What we got? We got $130. Okay, I'm gonna cut that out. All right, let's put $130 in there as my starting balance. We're gonna do that every month and probably around 8% return, and I'm going to do it for 20, 30, 40 years. You will be shocked by how much money that becomes. That's how compound interest works. And so play around with the numbers, and it'll blow your mind. Dr. Kimbro is coming up.
Speaking of values and speaking of customer service, probably the best example. And I know some of you may have heard it before, but listen, the question begs asking, and we can't hone in on this case study enough. I spent a better part of the day with this woman. Unfortunately, I can see by the eyes, some of you don't even know who she is, Osceola McCarty. Who in the world is Osceola McCarty? Well, let's revisit this case study. She was a little black woman in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, who took on the wash of everybody in the community. And she did that for 80 years, more than 80 years. And over the course of 80 years of work, every week, she would make her daily deposits from taking in the wash. She'd charge a nickel for a little boy's shirt, maybe a dime for a little girl's dress, 25 cents for sheets, a nickel for pillowcases. And everybody laughed at little old Ossie McCarthy. Girl, what you doing washing those people's clothes? You can't find something else better to do? Started working at age 8, didn't quit till she was 84 years old. And every week she would go down to the bank and drop off her, her little daily deposits. Did that for almost 80 years, until one day she gets a phone call from a banker. And the banker says, Ms. McCarty, as a senior level vice president at this bank, I am obligated to ask you the following question. It's no secret, you do have a sizable investment at our institution, but the question begs asking, what do you want done with the resources in the untimely nature of your death? And there was a pause on the phone. And the banker could sense, Ms. McCarty, you haven't even thought about that. And then he asked, Ms. McCarty, do you even know how much money you have saved in more than 80 years? She said, no, please tell me. He said, more than $250,000. And there was another pause on the phone, and he sensed she doesn't even have the idea of the net worth and value of $250,000. He said, Ms. McCarty, end the conversation. Do me a big favor. Come by my office next week so we can take up this conversation a little bit more. I want you to think about this for the next couple of days. Next week comes along, Osceola McCarty goes down to the bank. And she walks into that office of that banker. And that banker says, Ms. McCarty, I got 10 dimes on my desk. And these dimes represent your money. And when I point to one of those dimes, you tell me what portion of your money you want done with your earnings. She says, fine. He points to the first dime. She says, well, I want you to give that portion to my church. I love my pastor. I love my church members. I don't want them to be without. He said, fine. Points to the next 2 dimes. And she says, well, I never got married. I never had any children, but I do have 2 nephews, and I want them to be taken care of when I'm gone. He says, fine. And then he points to the following 7 dimes. And she says, I know exactly what I want you to do with that money. He said, sure. He said, send it to the school in town. He said, what school? He said, the University of Southern Mississippi. He said, a school that you were barred from attending because of your race? She says, yeah. So the next week, they send the bulk of her earnings over to the development office at the University of Southern Mississippi with a handwritten note from Osceola McCarty that read, please give this money to worthy and deserving Black college students who still possess the ability to dream. Well, when word got around throughout the world that this little washerwoman gave away every dime that came by her hand, everybody across the globe was matching that scholarship. Ted Turner, the founder of CNN News, TBS, he called a press conference in Atlanta. He said, if that woman can give away the bulk of her earnings, I can at least give away $1 billion. She didn't get a letter. She got a phone call from then President Bill Clinton begging her to come up to Washington, D.C. Said, Ms. McCarty, I got to bestow on you the highest honor I can give to a private citizen. Scared to death of flying, she takes the train from Hattiesburg to Washington, D.C. Here is an individual who never spent a night in a hotel room in her life. For the first time in her life, she spends a night in Washington, D.C. in a hotel room. But before she checks out the next morning, she makes up the bed before she goes. Press club, they got a luncheon for her in her honor. Journalist runs up to her and says, Ms. McCarty, how's it feel being a philanthropist? She says, what is that? Well, she goes back home to Mississippi, and the Clarion Ledger is writing an article on the local hero. And one of the writers says, Ms. McCarty, you have enabled the dreams of so many. Do you have a dream? And she said, yes, I have a dream, but I don't know if the Lord gonna let me see it. He says, please share it with the readers. So, well, I just have a dream. I just hope the Lord lets me be here long enough where I can see the first beneficiary of my scholarship. Less than 4 months later, Osceola McCarty sits in the front row at commencement, University of Southern Mississippi. And this is the picture that the development office sent me. I got it proudly displayed in my study at home. Who in the world are you looking at? You're looking at Stephanie Bullock. Who was little Stephanie Bullock? She was a business student, honor student, come from a little small town in Mississippi, town so small, doesn't even appear on most state maps. She walks across the stage and receives her degree as the first Osceola McCarty scholarship recipient. Less than 90 days later, Osceola McCarty makes her transition. And that writer who was writing the article hunts Stephanie Bullock down and says, Ms. Bullock, your benefactor is gone. She has passed on. Do you have any comments for our readers? And Stephanie Bullock strokes her chin and says, yes, I do have a comment. Please share it with our readers. She said, heaven couldn't have gained a better angel. Now, why in the world would we discuss this case study? Boys and girls, men and women, this thing is about service. Remember I said John Johnson passing the baton? How are you gonna make it better because you were here? That's a critical question. I didn't choose to be here and you didn't choose to be here. Look, the bottom line, you were chosen. So when are you gonna place your fingerprints on life and prove you were here? When are you gonna make a difference? There's only 4 things in life you wanna do. Number 1, you wanna make a difference. Number 2, you wanna make a difference with somebody else who wants to make a difference. Number 3, you want to make a difference with somebody else who wants to make a difference, doing something that makes a difference. But number 4, you want to make a difference with others who want to make a difference, doing something that makes a difference at a time when it makes all the difference in the world. This is the time. And how do you do that? Through service. Through service. Service is the price you pay for the space that you occupy. As a matter of fact, that's the formula for wealth. Q plus MA equals C. The quality of your service plus the quantity of your service plus the mental attitude in which it is rendered always equals compensation. Always equals compensation. Service is the price you pay for the space that you occupy.
That was Dr. Kimbro. You can follow him on Instagram at Dr. Dennis Kimbro. And you can watch today's entire talk on YouTube. It's called Putting It All Together, Success and Greatness with Dr. Dennis Kimbro. Hey, that is it for me. Hope you enjoyed this week's episodes. Stay tuned. I will see you on Monday. Have a great weekend. I'm out. Peace.